meet others who are interested in joining the network project and to get answers to any questions you might have. So the Kansas Center for Cultural Competency Advancement started through the Kansas Action Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of nurses, providers, and healthcare organizations that was developed in 2011 to implement recommendations proposed in the landmark Institute of Medicine's report, The Future of Nursing, Leading Change, Advancing Health. So the coalition's goal has been to advance nursing education, practice, and leadership. The coalition has been committed to increasing diversity in our nursing workforce and to building a culturally competent workforce in the state of Kansas that values diversity, inclusion, and social justice to positively influence health equity for all individuals, families, and communities. So in 2016, we developed this virtual center as part of a diversity initiative. And the purpose of our current project is to develop and engage a statewide community of nurses and other healthcare providers invested in creating and fostering a strong healthcare workforce that works towards health equity by promoting diversity, advocating for inclusion and social justice, and that values and provides culturally competent quality care. Now this slide I know is pretty busy and pretty small, and I'm not going to go through it in depth, but this is Leininger's Sunrise Enabler for the Theory of Culture, Care, Diversity, and Universality. And what I really wanted to focus on is, why is cultural competent care so important? Well, it's a pillar for achieving health equity by providing culturally sensitive and unbiased care. And you can see towards the bottom, there are 3 components of transcultural care activities, and that's culture care preservation maintenance, culture care accommodation negotiation, and culture care repatterning and restructuring. And when we are invested in culturally competent care, we can make sure that we are engaging our patients in their care and not reinforcing, but making sure that we are maintaining their cultural values and norms. So what are some common challenges in providing person-centered, culturally competent care? We want to hear from you. Maybe what are some challenges that you've encountered? Maybe what are some issues that have come up in your organizations?
And yeah, just, you can either do it in the chat or just shout out. We're a small enough group that you just tell us some of the challenges that you faced in providing person-centered, culturally competent care.
Or maybe while you're thinking and typing, I just presented some fairly generic potential challenges. One is, that term non-compliance, when a patient and family might not engage in the treatment regimen, and that results in poor health outcomes. And I think one of the greatest examples of this that was pretty significant is from the ethnography, The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, in which a young Hmong girl had intractable epilepsy, and her parents were not being non-compliant with the treatment regimen, but because of the significant lack of cultural care provided, the child was taken from her parents for a period of time, and there's just subsequent poor outcomes that occurred from that. But it really centered around the providers not providing culturally competent care because they were so unaware of the unique cultural norms and values and didn't seek to find out what those might be and how those were impacting the parents' decisions. So I see breastfeeding and not wanting to feed until the milk is in. So
can you explain that a little bit, Jay Lawson?
Sometimes running across that with culture that the family comes, the mom may be breastfeeding, and then the family comes and they want to bottle feed and feed more, and or maybe feel that colostrum may not be good for the baby, and wanting to bottle feed until mom has her real milk, as well as keeping the babies over warm and over wrapping, particularly the Hispanic culture.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
What about other people what are some challenges that you have faced or that you know of? Shirley, Vicky, Laura, I can see your faces. You must have some things to say.
I think for me, this is Shirley speaking, for those of you who can't see, I'm really thinking about just a step above in calling it culturally competent care. And while I'm okay with that term, I know a lot of folks are not. And so that's been one of my challenges, trying to figure out what that means, and then incorporating a level of cultural humility. And I think all of these terms confound the discussion.
That's, Shirley, you raise a great point. And we have had discussions about what is the best term? Is it cultural competency? Because we know that there is not an endpoint. It's an ongoing process. None of us can ever be culturally competent where we believe that we know everything there is to know. There is a newer term, cultural proficiency, and I'm not sure if that's really any different than cultural competency, but I absolutely agree with you. And that's one thing we definitely want to promote through the center, is the concept of cultural humility, and understanding what implicit bias is and how we can address our implicit biases.
Thanks, Shirley.
Do you have a better term, Shirley?
No, I don't. I've lived in cultural competency for a long time, knowing that I'm not competent in anything. That's just a goal to strive for.
Right.
But I think what I'm seeing more accepted would be culturally congruent care, because then that involves the client / patient / other person who is part of that conversation. And so I'm thinking, what do I have to do to be heard better? So I'm kind of using culturally congruent care just a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay. Any one more experience from someone of some challenge that you've faced in your work or life?
Well, Christy and Katie posted in the chat, and again, I think it picks up on this idea of how do we talk about this in a way that that isn't confounding, as Shirley said, or off-putting, but also where we can start to get some shared understanding. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason we asked for these, again, is that as we would move forward in this series, we're looking for either who has common issues like the breastfeeding or the wrapping the babies, tips, things that they've come across that they can use their network, this growing network, to help solve. And then also, similarly, at the higher level, I think you called it, Shirley, what are the larger issues around language and when it gets in the way, and how do we look for ways to move forward as a field. So in some ways it's a little bit tied to this next slide, Jill, around trying to draw from people's experience and help small groups start to figure out what's needed for the whole. So do you want to say more about this? What will you learn?
Well, I think so. This is what we're hoping is that we create this very vibrant online community where we can gain deeper understandings about cultural competency, cultural congruency that are drawn from our experiences and perhaps our challenges, and then how we can use networks to increase the effectiveness of our cultural competency efforts. And how we will learn is through sharing our experiences, our resources, helping each other with challenges, and I can't see the third. I got to try out new approaches. I had something blocking it. So this is for me, a very emergent process. There's not a lot of structure, which is why I think this is going to be really exciting and very innovative, that we as this community will, help each other to, learn together, again, share experiences and try different approaches and see what works and what may not work.
Any questions so far? Okay, so I think next we're going to talk a little bit about how does this whole idea of networks fit in with cultural competency or congruency, whatever we're going to call it here. And I think that would be a great topic for our first session, is to talk about language and, what we want to call what we're doing. But the idea, as Jill mentioned, is that and Shirley mentioned this too, is that this whole idea of cultural congruence or whatever, it is that it's an ongoing kind of process, because you're always interacting with people from different backgrounds and needing to draw on others. I mean, it's not like any one of us knows about every culture in the world, and so you don't know who you're going to be interacting with. And most of you have some kind of responsibility in your organizations for others and their ability to act appropriately and sensitively in situations. And that's why a network is so important. Because right now, a lot of you are kind of like this. You're in your silo at your workplace. You're somebody who cares about this, but there's not necessarily a lot of people that you can reach out to get help with the challenges that you're going to be continually coming up with. And as this country becomes more and more diverse, it's just going to become a huge problem. So there's kind of two reasons why a network's particularly useful. One, you need a set of connections to people and other resources that relate to specific different cultures. Sometimes you might need an interpreter. Where do you find an interpreter, for this particular fairly uncommon language? It's other people, like in this group, that can help you find that. Or you might want to know of a support organization for people from that particular culture. Or you might need to know about stores, whether online or physical stores, that could serve people because a patient has a particular need. So, I mean, I don't know, you can add in the chat other kinds of resources you would like to have to help you deal with the never-ending stream of different cultures that you might be coming across. So go ahead and add information in the chat about resources that you wished you had access to. Then you need people who are going to be able to help you in challenges and that are going to help you increase the awareness of other staff around you, because it doesn't work if just one individual is culturally congruent in your hospital or whatever, because there's many patients coming in, and everybody in your organization needs to have this cultural congruence, or needs to know, how to deal with a particular situation, or how to be proactive in interacting with someone who has different behaviors and beliefs. So having a network of people throughout the state and even the country who can support you when a challenge comes up and can give you their stories about how they've dealt with something, and maybe you need somebody to come in and do a training with staff in your organization. Other kinds of challenges. Maybe you can talk again in the chat. We have people responding in the chat. It's great. Yes, excellent. Tools to assess agency cultural congruency. I think that's a really great one, and I'm pretty sure that Jill has some great tools that she's going to be sharing with us. So if you have any other thoughts of, why a network would be useful, just share them in the chat. And then finally, what we're going to do is try to make sure that you have people within like an hour or two of you who can maybe form a closer network that you can access and maybe even get together in person. We'll kind of see how this flows out. And so we're going to have both hopefully regional networks and then some a statewide network that will be meeting virtually during these sessions. We're going to be working all together, anybody who's going to be involved in these sessions, to build these networks. We're going to talk about, easy ways, strategic ways that you can begin to do some network building around cultural congruence. And the interesting thing is that one of the most exciting things about learning about networks is learning about network leadership, because network leadership is really, if any of you took the little mini quiz of questions that Jill had on the handout that she was sending out, probably many of you listen well and are connecting people and reaching out to others. But when you look at them through a network lens, you'll be using those skills in some new ways. Like you're going to be listening well so that you can find people's interests so that you can connect them to other people. Like if a staff person comes to you and says, I'm dealing with, X, you can connect them to somebody who's going to be able to help them with that challenge. So it's as a listening to strategically connect. And the other thing is encouraging everybody in your organization to be this kind of network leader that's always listening and thinking about people they can connect people to, modeling inclusion and appreciation of diversity, because it's not enough to just know how to deal with a particular behavior on the part of somebody from a different culture. It's your whole organization needs to shift to this more appreciative sense of diversity, and realizing that diversity is going to be key to, our survival, as a country. We need different perspectives on things to help us solve the problems that we're all dealing with. You're going to be learning how not just to convene, but to help convene and help people get energized to act in some new ways. And you're not only going to be able to have a chance to help lead some maybe face-to-face groups on these issues, but we're all going to be learning how to do really great virtual sessions that are very interactive, that build these networks. And that's a skill that I know some of you are already using things like Zoom and other video conferencing. Kristen and I use it every day, just about, and are being able to have a lot more meetings and productive meetings because we don't have to drive an hour to get together with others. They're just a Zoom session away. So those are some of the really exciting things. So this is really about leadership in the 21st century, and you will not only be, learning about cultural congruence, but about this sort of new kind of leadership that will be probably very valuable in your life and in your career. You're going to be gaining a lot of different skills that you will be able to use in other situations. We're going to be doing some simple mapping and thinking about improving the networks around you. How to connect people more strategically, how to get different organizations to work together. And more that's being required of us, that a hospital has to be working with social service agencies, the police, whatever, to really do their job well. You're going to be learning a lot about both video conferencing and Google Docs, some new ways to use those to make your work more effective. And learning, again, how to do these fun, interactive virtual gatherings. like normally we won't be talking this much. We'll be letting you interact a lot more. And, interaction is the key, is what we're learning. It's the key to building a network that really works for you. It's the key to really having successful kinds of projects and efforts. And so, we are going to be focused on really helping you interact and learn from everybody else who's on this call. I'm sure all of you have some really valuable experience to share that others could benefit from. Okay, any questions now? Okay. Just feel free to ask them in the chat or say them verbally. Any questions so far? I mean, it is all, and just to assure you that we don't have this whole course outlined ahead of time. We're going to constantly be surveying you, talking with you, gathering what is it that you want to learn related to this. And so it's going to be a course that is custom designed for the group that's involved. So now Kristen is going to talk a little bit about how our sessions are going to work.
Yeah, so what we're thinking is, go ahead and hit the next slide. We'll have 5 sessions between November and June, and they won't be exactly every month, but what we're thinking about is the second Tuesday of each month, and we'll show you the dates at the end. The idea was to try to do it over the lunch hour so that if people, want to bring their meal and eat while we're doing this, you could do that. And 2 hours may seem like a long time, and it would be if it's like today where you have one person doing most of the talking. But the idea is that we're going to be doing a fair amount of breakout groups, so you'll be getting into smaller groups either to build new connections or around particular topics that are really interesting or meaningful for you. So there'll be these interactive sessions. We'll see based on the registration, as June already mentioned, if it starts to look like there are clusters of people registering that have geographic, that are by a geographic area, we'll probably try to convene those people in late October or November before the first webinar, just to see if there's some, what's the amount of connectivity already? Are there certain ways that you really want to focus your time to build certain skill sets or to take advantage of an opportunity? And then this last one about special learning pop-ups, as June said, part of what we want to do is, as we start to hear people talk about very specific either skills they already have. I know some of you said this morning, like, I don't know why this camera isn't working today on Zoom. I use it all the time. I love Zoom. We might want to have a very short 30 minutes on everyone that loves Zoom, get on and share what are your best tips and tricks on using Zoom to engage other people. And people who haven't learned it as much can listen in or benefit from some of the tips of folks that are using it. So those kind of pop-ups or a peer assist is just if there's a really big challenge and you can't talk to people right in your organization or in your community, you want to take advantage of a safe network. We'll be talking about how do you get some quick feedback where in a place where you might be stuck. So that's the big buckets, I guess. And June, you want to hit every session. So every time we get together on Zoom, we'll be doing something that builds relationships. So it might be mapping, so showing where the connections are and sort of showing how they're evolving. They might be getting you into small breakout groups to share certain things. We'll be celebrating what's going well, because again, one of the way you build energy is talk about what are you most excited about, what have you just come across that everybody should know about. It's the things that, that build energy in conversation and in networks. We'll always be using some kind of a tool and building on it every time. So, today is the first time we're all on with Zoom, but for those that come back, we'll start to try some of the other features like the online polling feature in Zoom or the breakout. Again, we'll be building on these tools. There'll be a tiny little content piece, but as I said earlier, all the content, short pieces like 15 minutes out of that 2 hours would go right into how can you use this, who's already has something similar, and it will start to be over those the course of the 5 sessions, that the content won't just come from June or myself or Jill. It will come from you, because we'll start to see in the chat things that you're really excited about that other people start saying, I want to hear more, I want to hear more. So we'll figure out how do we weave that in to these sessions. And you'll be practicing during the time, and we'll be inviting you to take some of these things back out and then say, how did this work when you used it again in your local setting. So go ahead, June, to the next one. I think this is a different way of sort of showing what we've said. Every time we would get together on one of these virtual Zoom calls, we'll be bringing in a piece tied to cultural competency, whether that's a success story or a challenge that somebody has, and how do we help think through that challenge. We'll be modeling and using tools, and some of you already are using tools that we may want to highlight for the whole. And then we'll be doing something tied to how do we understand networks? How do we either use data like maps to see connections or see where there's clusters of people working on particular things? How do we use data to think about network leadership? What are things you're already doing well, or goals that you want to set over these 5 sessions to become more proficient? And the goal is building regional and statewide networks. I see some little ideas in the chat, but I'm not totally tracking that. Am I doing this one, June? I think.
Oh, well, I could do it. I mean, part of what we're going to do is build a communication ecosystem. I mean, when you're all about interaction and engagement, it's really important that you build up a set of tools and platforms and places and spaces where people can engage and back and forth, not just during the Zoom sessions. So this is just a little chart that, I use. We won't go into it today. We may talk more about it if you're interested, is how do you, in your workplace, and we'll practice with this network, how do you pick and choose from all the different things that are out there to get our own personal set of platforms and processes for making sure that we are, have a places to share and discuss information, capture and share innovation, build relationships and collaborate, and track network development and learn from each other. So that's just a fun chart that, just to let you know, we're going to be thinking about, all these kinds of things. So is this one for you, Kristen?
Yeah, I think so. Again, as you're thinking about this for yourself or for sharing it with colleagues, there will be the virtual group sessions that happen the second Tuesday. There'll be ways to try out activities on your own or with others that commit to trying similar things like, Google Docs or mapping tools. There'll be ways to reach out specifically to build your network. And there'll be ways to plug into brown bag lunches based on, who knows, I'm seeing in the chat box, people are excited about reading a common book. Maybe there'll be like not just a pop-up, but a little book study that has lunch, once a month or every other month.
So we are really interested in finding out a little bit more information, and it would be great if you could put this in the chat. We were talking about an online survey, but I think it's easier if in the chat. And if you are having any problem, if you cannot access the chat, if you would set up a little email and send it to Jill that has the answers to these in. If any of you remember, to get to the chat, you need to just go up to the top. There's a black bar at the top. You may have to move our faces. If you have the faces up at the top and you click on more, it'll bring up the chat window. And in that, you can just quickly answer these questions right now, or we can, Jill, perhaps maybe it might make more sense is to just send it out to people. We'll just send this little survey out to people right after this session. Do we have everybody's emails? see, you may not have captured, we may need to get your email. And some of you have 2 people there. If you could at least put your email in the chat, that would be great. Or email back to Jill right now to let her know that you were on this call, because I don't think we actually captured everybody's emails.
I think that's correct. And when we go to the final slide, maybe we can put my email address in there. But I do, as you're looking at these questions on the survey, one thing that I hadn't put in the informational sheet that I sent out, because I was still working on this, is we are going to try to get continuing ed for the webinars. Thank you, Angela, for connecting me with someone who can do that. I just am looking through everything I need to do, but there would be CEs connected to the webinars, because I know that, you know, it's nice to get something from the webinar that you can use for your continuing ed.
But if people could go over to the chat.
Here.
And type in, and Jill, you can type in your email.
Yes, that's what I just I just realized I could do that. So I just put in my email address.
Can you hit reply, I think, or hit return so it pops
Or maybe you have it, you're sending it to a private conversation.
Oh, I think I accidentally did private. There.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But if the rest of you, if you're able to access the chat, and it seems like maybe people aren't being able to access it, and could put your emails in there, because we really want to find out from you if you want some more information. We want to make sure that you get that, and if we need to work with your organizational structure to get you approval or whatever to take that. So if you go down to the bottom of the chat, and maybe in a minute we'll revert back to the regular, we'll stop screen sharing in a minute, so you'll have a chance at that point to answer those questions. So Jill, you want to do this one?
Sure. So as June and Kristen had mentioned, we are planning some webinars on the second Tuesday of the month. And so these are the dates that we have put on our calendars with the webinar link. So this is the same link that we use every time for the webinars. And then I have a link to the Eventbrite just to register, so we have an idea of the number of people who would be participating. I really would like to make sure that we are able to send this information out to nurses who are, and other health providers who are working in the county health department. So I'm pretty sure Christy and Katie were able to send to their listserv, to nurses who are in the clinics, safety net clinics, the critical access hospitals, other hospitals and healthcare organizations, the nursing programs across the state. So feel free to send information on to any of your colleagues who you think might be interested in participating in this project. Everyone is welcome. We want to be very inclusive. So I wasn't intentionally leaving anyone out with sending out this first round. It was just who I've made connections with. And the other really quick thing I want to mention is we have a small pot of money for some network development in the region. So if you have ideas on how to network across communities or organizations and think that some small funding might help with that, we do have money for doing that.
So if everybody could take a minute. Now, I think Angela and Lynette, if you're, or several others who might be on the phone and maybe you don't have access to the chat, if you could even tell us your chat, your email right now, because it's so important that, that we get your email to just send up follow-up information. If you're not interested, it's still good, because you might know some others in your organization that you can forward the information on. So, okay, we've got Brian, Shirley, Seehaber. Okay, let's see. Okay, so somebody, Lynette sent one.
Oh, okay, great.
Great, to Jill. And Jill's email is jpeltzer2 at kumc.edu. Let me repeat that again. J Peltzer, Peltzer, and then the number 2 at kumc.edu. So great. We've got, okay, but how about a chance for questions? People have any questions about this?
Maybe any comments? Not yet. Okay.
Like what would make these sessions valuable to you? If we could just have a quick go round, just, what are you looking for in these kinds of sessions? And I'll just call out names, and if you're willing to answer them, you can just say pass if you don't.
Oh, and June, I have one other quick, students. Oh, I almost forgot to mention students. We certainly welcome students, and again, all health professionals. We started this kind of geared towards nurses because it was through our action coalition that's for nurses, but we want to be very inclusive. So please share with any of your colleagues, students that you think would be interested in participating.
And we'll work with you to help. Like, so you'll get these, for example, you'll get these video sessions, and we can even show you how to take little, what we call snippets out to you. You could show your students all the materials, all the PowerPoints that we'll be having, that will have some good content on cultural congruence. Those will be accessible to you. Some of the network building activities, those will be accessible to you in the Google Docs. We'll have little PowerPoints with the different activities on them. So yeah, you'll get a lot of resources. Yeah.
Let's see what else. There's some folks saying that they would love to be able to share them right in their classroom. So that's great. That's, again, the idea would be anything we do, we want to be able to have you be able to share it. There was a question, Jill, about it's Kansas State particularly, correct?
Well, ideal. What we're really interested in is creating this community in Kansas, but I think we wouldn't want to say it's not open to providers outside of the state who are interested. So I think, because I know especially some of the communities that border, like Kansas City, I'm a block away from Kansas City, Missouri, so we collaborate a lot across the state line. So I think, we're very open to whoever's interested. And then I see Angela about the 2 hours in the middle of the day. Yeah, that's a lot of time, especially for nurses who might be doing shift work.
Would an hour and a half be workable though? It's just that you learn so much more when you get a chance to interact with others, and people actually love that the best. But I understand about a time, and it may be that we send you an agenda ahead of time, and maybe you can maybe come to the particular part that's content oriented, or maybe you want to come to the peer assist part where you really need some help with a challenge. So Angela, if you would give us a little bit more. Okay, there's another suggestion for evenings. I think that we're pretty flexible, and sounds like what we need to do, remember, we're all about flexibility here, send out a survey, and we can find out what times are best for people. And then, we would have agendas ahead of time, so you could be able to, squeeze in. If you only could take an hour for lunch, that could be possibly. And the webinars will all be recorded. And I've learned that you can learn how to kind of scan through. It might be a 2-hour session, but you can like there'll be time in breakout rooms. We'll just pause the recording there. So, most of the recordings you can just check on if you want to pick up the content pieces.
And there's something, the other thing that people might think about if you have limited time is, do you have colleagues who are also interested that you could share the time where someone might attend for a certain amount of time? Like if I was interested in the topic around cultural competency, I might attend that session, but perhaps my colleague wants to be a part of the breakout networking opportunity. So I don't think that we're going to lock anyone into having
the same kind of constraint. Really hard to get off more than an hour of time. Let us know in the chat if that's a constraint, or just tell us verbally here.
June, I think maybe we do it in the follow-up survey, because I think it's a great comment, but I think trying to get a sense of the length of the session, as well as like if during the day is going to be challenging. Part of what happens in networks, I think, is that we want to be responsive to those that know they really want to do it and try to figure it out, and then you build on something, and maybe the next one is an evening, or it's a day and evening, or this is a little bit of an experiment to just really start getting these connections happening. But we want to hear for sure if there's things that are going to be big deal breakers. So
we'll add that to
the follow-up survey.
Yeah.
Other things that people either see as a benefit. Oh, go ahead, Lynette.
Well, I was just thinking one area that we need to make sure we're very cognizant is to include our behavioral health professionals.
Yes.
So I want to make sure we get some of them involved in this discussion as well.
Yes, absolutely.
If you had any emails, names or emails, that would be really great if you could share them with Jill. And that goes for all of you. If you know other people that at least would like to get information about this, because we'd really like to have a class that had, 30, we'd like at least 30 people to sign up for this, because usually some people can't make it. And really Zoom handles, I've had 25 people on it many times, and and we'll be doing work in breakout rooms. So, it's very comfortable with that size. So we'd really like the names of others.
Right. Absolutely.
Any other things? We've got about 5 minutes left. And again, if you have things that you want to share, please do. If you're shy or you feel like you don't want to do this in front of other people and you want to just talk to Jill, please do. Because probably we'll send a follow-up and we'll try to huddle later in the week or next week to figure out how might we adjust things a bit. So other things, either that you think, ooh, this seems like it could be really valuable, things that you're excited about, or things that you feel like would have to be there for it to be something that would work for you or your colleagues.
And I might mention, as you're thinking about things and other colleagues, we use the 2014 guidelines for culturally competent nursing care to kind of frame it as the framework for the center. And I am happy to send the article about those guidelines out with the survey in case there are colleagues that would be interested in learning about them, or people aren't familiar with them, because they are really nice in thinking about different topics. For example, the first five guidelines are focused on the individual provider's care of the patient, and the last 5 guidelines focus more on the systems level, such as the organization's responsibility in the provision of culturally competent care, or evidence-based practice that supports culturally competent care. So those might be helpful just in terms of thinking about topics that people might be interested in, or where there might be, people may not feel as skilled.
This is Shirley again, and I think all the ideas that you've expressed are really great ideas. And sending out the survey to kind of get a feel for where everyone's at. We've got some baseline data here that some people can do an hour, some can't. I really loved your idea about maybe sharing the webinar or the Zoom session so that if you can't be here for 2 hours, that would be great. I also would find it really helpful if you sent out the 2014 guidelines with the survey. I think that would help us kind of focus where we might want to go as our participation in the network.
Okay.
So I really, really love all the ideas that you've thrown out already.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Shirley.
Oh, yes. And Chris, yes, we have a website. We have a virtual center, and I will send that link out. Again, we were trying to put in content that centers around the 10 guidelines, and there's so much that we would like to add still. We're planning to create some case studies that might be interactive. I would like to develop maybe a template for nursing program curricula and where content might fit into some generic nursing courses. So if anyone's interested in projects for students, let me know, because there's certainly a lot that we can still add to the center.
Well, it's a beautiful thing to see 18 squares, whether they're with names or faces, on this Monday morning. It was a nice way to start my week. And so look for a link, a follow-up link from us. Thanks for being on today, as well as sharing very specific suggestions and resources. I think as Jill started out at the beginning, like our commitment to you is to continue to be responsive to make these sessions work for you, both on the topic as well as in strengthening relationships, strengthening the network. So having those kind of practical asking for this practical feedback will happen every single time because we're going to be adjusting as we go to make them relevant for everyone. To give time is precious, right? So we want to make sure that your time is used well and that you're connecting with other people in the network well. So anything else, Jill or June, that we should say?
Yes, and Shirley has an excellent question. Mm-hmm. The recordings will be archived at the Kansas Center for Cultural Competency Advancement website, and I will send that link out with the follow-up survey and guidelines. So we have a web person who will help us get the recording link there.
I see head nods, so people are thinking that's a good idea, Jill, I think. Anything else for the good of the order? Amazing people? Amazing names?
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. Very excited to see everyone who participated today, and anxious to see how this evolves.
And one thing, we would be working with everybody on technology, because you can, Zoom works great on, at least I know, iPhones. I think any smartphone, you can download Zoom, or iPads. And so if you don't have, you can also get like $25 little cameras for your regular desktop computers. And so we would help you work out the technology so we'd be able to see your lovely face. It just helps the interaction. I just think you'd be amazed to see how much more you can get done when you're able to see each other. So we would work with that. Not that it would be an absolute requirement, but I think most of you could find a solution where we would be able to see the video. Well,
hey.
All right, well, noon, whatever time it is up there. I'm in Ohio. I didn't say I was in Ohio, so I'm the only.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Vicki. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Chris, is it?
Yes, Chris.
Should we stay on, Jill and Kristen?
Let's just
yes.
stay for a few minutes.